Alright, what's up guys, got another video of what if Anakin Skywalker and Obi Wan became Emperors of the Galaxy. So I started a Cash App if you want to donate, if you have a video idea you want to see, and if you do, I'll try to make it into a short or a video. So the Cash App will be linked down below. But if you like this type of content, then be sure to subscribe for more what if slash fanfics, lore, comics, reviews, video essays, and just all things Star Wars. But with all that out of the way, why don't we just dive right on in. So the story starts during the events of Revenge of the Sith. During the fight between Anakin and Obi Wan on Mustafar, the two were swirling with emotions. Anakin with hatred and rage, and Obi Wan with regret and sadness. Both negatives pushing against one another. As their lightsabers clashed over the hot, ferocious lava of the Hellscape planet, Anakin stopped and so did Obi Wan. Anakin yelled, "Master, this is pointless. The Jedi are gone, but we can be different." Obi Wan was unsure of where Anakin was going, but he responded, "Anakin, Chancellor Palpatine is evil." Anakin sighed. "From my point of view, the Jedi are evil." Obi-Wan sighed. "Then you are lost." But Anakin responded, "But Master, things can be different. If you join me, we can bring balance to the galaxy and to the Force. We could overthrow Palpatine." Obi-Wan couldn't believe what he was hearing, but the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. Maybe this was the only way. Anakin committed atrocities that wiped out the Jedi, but Palpatine, he was even worse. But together, they could change everything. Anakin could see Obi-Wan's hesitation and he deignited his saber, with Obi-Wan in turn doing the same. Anakin walked up to his master and spoke. "Master, join me and we can bring peace and security to our new empire." Obi-Wan heard the word "our" and imagined it. Him and Anakin ruling over the galaxy, not as dictators, but as emperors of the galaxy. Obi-Wan finally caved in. Very well, Anakin. We will bring an end to the Sith, but with the Jedi gone, we'll begin our own order. One without the restraints of the Jedi or Sith. A new Grey Order. Anakin smiled, but first they ran over to Padme and knew she needed medical attention. Anakin had C-3PO carry her back onto the ship, and they were about to board when they both felt it. Palpatine was landing on Mustafar. They both looked and nodded at each other, ready for the upcoming battle. Palpatine's ship landed and the Dark Lord of the Sith walked out with a squad of clones behind him. Palpatine looked at Anakin and Obi-Wan and laughed. "So, my apprentice has betrayed me. No matter, you have outlived your usefulness, and you will now die." Anakin and Obi-Wan ignited their lightsabers, and Palpatine ignited his crimson saber as well. With the Sith scream, Palpatine launched forward towards Anakin as the clones fired upon Obi-Wan, who blocked each blaster bolt. Kenobi used a massive force push that launched the clones into the lava below, and he joined the battle against Palpatine. The Chancellor saw Obi-Wan join the fray and used the force to call another lightsaber from his ship and ignited it, and blocked an attack from Obi-Wan. Anakin launched forward using his strength to try and overpower Palpatine, but the Sith Lord dodged and easily blocked each strike. But as Palpatine went in for the attack, Obi-Wan would block and defend. The Skywalker and Kenobi duo was formidable. Anakin would go in for the attack using Form 5, and Obi-Wan would step in and defend using Form 3. Palpatine, though, went all out. He switched between each of the 7 forms to catch his opponents off guard and would allow them to get closer, using that to his advantage. As Anakin went in for a strike, he was shocked with a blast of Force lightning and was sent flying back against Padme's ship. Palpatine used this as a distraction and sprinted forward and cut off Obi-Wan's left arm and used Force lightning and electrocuted him next to Anakin. The Master and Apprentice both laid in pain but looked at each other and nodded. They would end this with the next attack. Anakin and Obi-Wan rushed forward, except this time Anakin jumped over Palpatine, and Obi-Wan attacked from the front as Anakin attacked from the back, but Palpatine managed to block both strikes from both sabers, but they predicted this, and Obi-Wan deignited his saber and Anakin doing the same as they threw their sabers at the other, which caught Palpatine off guard and allowed them the chance to cut him in 3. His head rolled off and his legs fell over and his torso dropped to the ground. The Sith Lord was dead. Anakin and Obi-Wan fell to the ground exhausted, and Obi-Wan held his arm in pain, but Anakin held him up back to Padme's ship. Obi-Wan knew they couldn't head back to Polis Massa. Yoda would try to stop them from doing what they have to do. Anakin jumped into hyperspace towards Coruscant. They landed and Anakin took Padme and Obi-Wan to a medical facility where Obi-Wan got a new arm and Padme successfully gave birth to Luke and Leia. Padme survived and she had Anakin by her side, and as she rested, Anakin and Obi-Wan knew what they needed to do. They headed to the Senate chambers, and as a meeting was being held, they barged in and they declared themselves as Emperors of the Galaxy. However, Palpatine had already begun the process of forming the Republic into the First Galactic Empire. They showed proof that Palpatine was dead and doctored evidence of him wanting the poster boys of the Republic, Anakin and Obi-Wan, to lead the galaxy into a new era if anything were to happen to him. The Senate could do nothing against this, and effective immediately, the Republic formed into the Empire. On Pulse Masta, Yoda had his head down in shame as Obi-Wan hadn't returned, and he heard from Bail Organa what Skywalker and Kenobi had done. He had truly failed as Grand Master of the Jedi Order, and without telling anyone, he went into self-exile on Dagobah, where he would spend the rest of his days. Padme regained her strength after resting after giving birth, and she was shocked to hear what Anakin and Obi-Wan had done. But when she thought about it, she decided that maybe this was the best option for the galaxy. With Anakin and Obi-Wan leading it, even if they were emperors, they could push the galaxy in a much better direction. Anakin and Obi-Wan negotiated with the Senate, and they decided that everything would go through the two of them. The Senate could still act as a separate power, but every important matter that was being voted upon would be decided by Skywalker and Kenobi, and if they acted out of turn, the two of them could dismantle the Senate. It was tough for the likes of Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, but with the help of Padme, she convinced the rest of the Senate to accept it. They did, and the Empire was truly created. 20 years passed and the Empire flourished. Emperor Skywalker and Emperor Kenobi ruled with an iron but fair fist. They treated everyone of the galaxy with fairness and equality, but any siege of rebellion and resistance was quickly wiped out. A new Grey Force Order was created, one where the constraints of the Jedi and Sith were no more. Jedi who survived Order 66 either stayed in hiding or joined this new order with the likes of Cal Kestis and Caleb Dune, but most importantly Ahsoka Tano. She had been in hiding ever since Order 66, but after discovering Anakin and Obi-Wan to become emperor, she was conflicted. She didn't know what to do, but when she heard about this new Grey Order that was forming under the banner of the Empire under Anakin and Obi-Wan, she thought it would be better than just roaming the galaxy aimlessly. During this time, Anakin and Padme had two more children, Jin Skywalker, who was 16, and Shmi Skywalker, who was 10. All four of their children had begun training. Luke was the apprentice of Anakin, and Leia was the apprentice of Obi-Wan, with Jin being the apprentice of Ahsoka, and Shmi was only a few years away from finding a master. The clones had also been kept as the primary military force of the Empire. During the first year, Anakin ordered for new badges to be continuously created, some with and some without their chips, for more diversity, until the number of clone troopers in the Empire reached 100 million. Anakin and Obi-Wan turned the former Jedi Temple on Coruscant into their royal palace and created a dual throne room where they would both sit as emperors. Everything had flourished, but that was about to change. Darth Maul had survived and teamed up with an angry former Jedi Temple guard who is now called the Grand Inquisitor. He was supposed to have a spot in Palpatine's new empire, but that was all ruined due to Obi-Wan and Anakin, and they would pay, so he teamed up with Maul. And for the past 2 decades, Maul and the Grand Inquisitor hid in the Outer Rim in unknown regions. They built up a criminal underworld and united the syndicates and other warring criminal factions under a new version of the Shadow Collective. They made sure to stay out of the eye of the Empire until it was time to strike, and now was that time. Obi-Wan was looking down on the lower levels of Coruscant from a balcony. He reflected over the past 20 years, but he looked back and smiled as he saw Anakin with Shmi on top of his shoulders and Padme talking to Ahsoka and Jin. Luke and Leia were all somewhere training. He wanted to keep an eye on them, but the twins were a handful, powerful like their father, but with the potential to surpass them all. But as Obi-Wan looked back down, he saw someone he hadn't seen since Mandalore. Maul. He had to look again, but it was him. The Zabrak smiled and pointed up. As Obi-Wan looked up, he saw an armada of ships exit hyperspace. Coruscant was being invaded, but before he could react, a Star Destroyer bombarded the royal palace. An explosion engulfed the former Jedi Temple, and Obi-Wan managed to put a force shield up, but he was knocked back and knocked out. When he woke up, everything was in chaos. He could hear the screams, the panic, the fear, and death all around. But most of all, the flames, the heat they gave off, but worst of all was the smell. Flesh was burning, and Obi-Wan's first thought was Anakin and everyone else. He used the Force to push any rebel and debris out of the way and search for anyone. He moved a few pillars and found Anakin, who had just regained consciousness. Anakin looked around in horror. He was just holding Shmi, but when he felt their legs, he breathed a sigh of relief. But when he went to grab her legs, that was all that was left of her. A tear fell down his face, but as he turned around, he saw Jin lying under a boulder, and he moved the boulder with the Force push, but the top half of his torso is all that remained. Anakin went into autopilot as he tried looking for Padme until he found her charred corpse next to Ahsoka, who was just as burned. She tried to block the explosion, but to no avail. Anakin dropped to his knees with tears filling his eyes. 2 of his children, his wife and his apprentice, were all dead. Whoever did this would die 1,000 deaths, he told Obi-Wan. Anakin asked, Obi-Wan, who did this? Obi-Wan in a rageful tone responded, Maul. Anakin knew they should have found and dealt with that scum, but now he would pay. He found a communicator and ordered for all troops to defend Coruscant now, and a space battle engaged. The new Battle of Coruscant waged on as Empire X-Wings and TIE fighters filled with clone troopers waged a fierce battle against the Shadow Collective filled with criminals and bounty hunters. Anakin and Obi-Wan were going to join the battle until they heard the sound of a lightsaber, and when they followed, the sound they saw was Leia fighting Boba Fett and Cad Bane. But before they could reach her in time, Boba Fett used his grappling hook to catch her feet, and Cad Bane blasted her right between the eyes, killing her instantly. Anakin had enough. A third child of his was now dead. He was going to find and save Luke. Anakin embraced the dark side and used the Force to pick up and choke the two bounty hunters. They tried to struggle, but Emperor Skywalker was reaching his full potential. With the closing of his fists, he broke their necks, killing them. Anakin ran to Leia and closed her eyes, apologizing to his daughter for not saving her. He was going to end Maul. Anakin felt into the Force, and since Luke had been taken onto the Star Destroyer, the main ship of this attack, he looked at Obi Wan and they nodded at each other. They ignited their lightsabers and ran through the remains of the palace, killing any Shadow Collective members or bounty hunters who got in their way. Anakin and Obi Wan found their starships and launched into the atmosphere, blasting enemy ships out of the way. Anakin was the greatest pilot in the galaxy, and Obi Wan was no joke in the cockpit. They made their way through the aerial battle and looked around as thousands of clones and Shadow Collective members fought against one another. Anakin commanded his Grey Order to help the clones fight back and to take control and lead them to victory. They would deal with Maul. Anakin and Obi Wan landed in the hangar bay and jumped out, slashing down anyone who stood in their way. They made their way to the bridge of the Star Destroyer, and there they saw Luke with the saber pointed to his throat. Anakin scowled as he saw Maul and someone he wasn't familiar with, that being the Grand Inquisitor next to Luke, with Maul pointing a saber at his son. Maul laughed. "Skywalker and Kenobi, your time has come to an end." Maul was about to cut down Luke when Obi Wan used the Force to stop the lightsaber and to toss it back, causing Maul to stumble backwards. The two Emperors used this distraction to sprint forward to begin their onslaught. Obi Wan took on Maul and Anakin took on the Grand Inquisitor. The former Jedi Temple Guard laughed, telling Anakin he would end the Emperor. Anakin said nothing, as this man was a part of the revolt that led to the death of his family. As the Grand Inquisitor moved forward, he could feel the anger, the hatred, the power behind Anakin's eyes, and in that moment he realized it was futile. This being was the chosen one for a reason. But it was too late, as Anakin had his robotic arm through the Grand Inquisitor's chest and finished him off by using his lightsaber to stab him through the throat. He ripped out his fist and the Grand Inquisitor fell to the ground dead. Maul saw this as he engaged Obi Wan in a duel. The former Sith scowled at Kenobi. He had waited for this moment for decades. As Maul took a stance, so did Obi Wan, taking his prized Form 3 defensive stance. Maul leapt forward and Kenobi slashed through his lightsaber and through his chest, but he backed off as Anakin walked forward and picked up the defeated Maul by the horn and tossed him like a ragdoll through the room. His horn broke off and he broke his arm on impact. Maul struggled to breathe as Anakin walked forward, and as Obi-Wan freed Luke, they watched as the Chosen One beat the Zabrak to death with his bare hands until he was nothing but a bloody paste. After killing Maul, Anakin wiped the blood from his hands and walked over to Luke, apologizing for not being able to save their family, but Luke told him that apologizing was a sign of weakness and that their family wouldn't want them to be stuck in their deaths forever. They would still mourn, but they would move forward as well. Anakin agreed, and the three walked out of the Star Destroyer, but not before Anakin rigged it to explode from the inside. The three Force users escaped in Anakin's ship, and Luke watched as the Star Destroyer exploded, taking many of the Shadow Collective with it. In the hours following, Anakin, Obi-Wan, Luke, and the rest of the Grey Order and clones would wipe out the remaining Shadow Collective. Anakin would use the newly constructed Death Star to wipe out the planets responsible, to show the galaxy what would happen if something like this ever happened again. Anakin would bury Padme, his three children, and Ahsoka on Naboo, and thousands would attend the funeral. But after it ended, Anakin would be the last to leave, placing a hand on Padme's grave, and as a tear fell down his face, he thanked her for loving him, and he promised he would keep their last son alive and make the galaxy better. 10 more years would pass, and Anakin and Obi-Wan would step down as emperors and allow Luke Skywalker to take the throne, and they would become the new emperor's advisors, and with Luke as the new emperor of the galaxy. He, his father Anakin, and Obi-Wan would rule the galaxy with an iron fist, but with one that was fair and equal for all sentient life, but would stomp out any threat of rebellion or resistance if need be. Alright, and that's the story. So definitely an interesting one. I always liked the idea of Anakin returning to the light or Obi-Wan turning to the dark, or somehow the two coming together, even if it's in the light or the dark side on Mustafar. That's always an interesting idea. I've seen Anakin turning Obi-Wan to the dark side done a few times, and I wanted to do that, but I kind of wanted to put a different spin on it, and I feel like this story is that with a different spin. I had fun writing it, definitely got brutal at some points, but I thought it turned out decent overall. But if you liked the video, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and comment. Go donate to the Cash App if you have an idea, like a what if, or just a video idea in general, and I'll turn that into a video or a short. And go check out my other channels. All that will be linked down below. But with all that out of the way, I will see you all in the next one. Peace.